You were saying about your response to the Shah.
I said, so the outcries will reach the Congress, and they will make their displeasure known. Our government will be affected by the pressures on the Congress, and it will adversely affect our relations. He looked at me for about 15 seconds. Then he nodded, said, yes, I can understand that. We'll do the best we can, Mr. Bassett. Now I wanted to talk to you about this other matter, and he turned to another matter. The result of that meeting was a very modest increase in the price of oil. Welcome in the West. Welcome by all. I was happy with that. Having been the guy that exposed myself to the Shah's anger, and having him agree that he understood that, and he was very reasonable.
No.
About 5 months later, I got word from the court minister, my friend Mr. Alam, that the Shah wanted to see me. It was after Libya had received a 3 or 4 times increase in the price of its oil. I went up to see His Majesty, and he was sitting there very calmly and collectedly. Said, Mr. Master, you recall that about 4 months ago, 5 months ago, we discussed the problem of unilateral action on the price of oil. And you recall that you said that if a country acted unilaterally, it would impair relations. You recall that you urged me to be modest and moderate, and to give time, which I did. Our negotiations went on 15 or 18 days because of that time factor that you had mentioned. He said, then you turn around and give Gaddafi, that madman who's trying to create disorder throughout the Islamic world, you give him a price of 3 or 4 times the going price, and you accept that with resignation and fortitude. He said, I don't know if you listened to the broadcasts in Farsi from that radio up above Batum and from East Germany that are beamed in the voice of the Iranian resistance inside Iran, being from the Soviet Union and East Germany. But they've been on me ever since the Gaddafi thing, saying that I'm the running dog of the imperialists, I do their will, and it's only when you have a great man like Gaddafi and you follow him that the interests of the Arab world will be safeguarded. He said, this has taught me one lesson, Mr. Ambassador. When we negotiate with the oil companies and with you, the United States, the only thing you understand is if somebody behaves like a son of a bitch. And he never, never, never got over that. Why we let the Libyan thing go the way we did, I don't know. Why we gave Dr. Hammer the ability to do that, I don't know.
I have the impression that at one point the Nixon administration wanted the oil companies as a whole to negotiate with all the OPEC countries as a whole. The Shah refused what was called the joint approach, because he did, and I guess Irwin came over to uphold that position.
Irwin came over just to add emphasis.
Yeah.
He didn't produce anything new.
No.
He just came over to add emphasis. Originally, the Shah had said we'll negotiate individually with the oil companies, but that was a minor point, and he accepted the business of the consortium, which had been working together. That was never a big thing.
Yeah.
But Jack Irwin came over because he was undersecretary then, I think.
That's right. Yeah.
And he came over to as a form of expression, and the Shah reassured him what he had already told us and what we knew, that there was no problem about negotiating with the consortium.
Was there ever any discussion of, let's say, political or economic pressures as a way on the Shah or the OPEC countries to get them to moderate price demands?
No.
Oh, no.
On the contrary.
Yeah.
We behaved as if it was of no interest to our government.
Yeah.
And that's why I said the oil companies went in there with nobody behind them, and these governments that could affect their operations throughout the OPEC countries, with their governments able to take sanctions or do whatever they want. And I felt, frankly, that it was one of the silliest things that I've ever seen a so-called leading power do, to expose yourself and your oil companies, through your oil companies, to an action which once taken, nobody can walk the cat back home without being called a running dog of the imperialists. When a decision is taken about the increase of the price of oil, it's taken, and it's taken publicly, and we're not going to walk away from it. And we didn't do nearly enough, soon enough, and we didn't seem to understand the problem at that time. This business, I never could understand why the government sort of said, well, let the oil companies work this out with the OPEC countries.
Why do you think that was the case? Do you have a clue as to what the decision was in Washington?
I have no clue, because it was so illogical for anybody that's dealt in power politics. And by power politics, I mean the power was all in the hands of the OPEC people. The other guys, there was nothing they could do. And if you don't have somebody behind you saying, no, wait a minute now, if you're going to do that, we're going to have to rethink some things too, they're going to go ahead and shove you around. If they have a monopoly position and we are oil short, as we were in the subsequent period, they can go ahead and do it anyway. But at that time, that was certainly not the case. But after we let it happen in Libya, of all places, because not only the Shah in Farsi was getting beaten to death by the voice of free Iran, the Saudis and all the others were being called out in the broadcast coming from Batum and East Germany, beamed on the Arab countries in Arabic. They were being called the running dogs who had given in to the American and European imperialists and all the rest of it.
Now, later that year, September 71, OPEC resolved to begin negotiations with oil companies over the issue of nationalization of the ownership of the holdings in their own countries. Can you discuss this with the Shah, the question of nationalization that year, 71? Do you recall that?
I'd have to think back. Offhand, I just don't remember. We recognize the right of every country to nationalize. I mean, that's a national right of facilities and things that are within their domain. But I don't recall any particular discussions about that.
Okay.
There probably were, and there probably telegrams, probably they've been declassified.
I don't know. That's right. Okay. Now, I guess sort of a final question, and that might lead to your reflections on this whole question of U.S.-Iran relations. So a lot of people, some people have said the Shah emphasized economic modernization. The Shah emphasized had great interest in economic modernization of his country, but never really paid attention to the political
almost.
They never paid attention to the political modernization problem of constitutional government or expanding democracy in his country. Was that something you ever discussed with him? The question of political modernization, or
as I mentioned earlier, I had discussions with him in general terms, not on any instructions from Washington, but about the future. And he said to me he was trying to build up an opposition to create, because when he was gone, if you didn't have an opposition, you had no alternative form of government, and demagogues came out of the woodwork and so forth and so on. And that is why he had what I called earlier, he helped create the opposition party in the Diet, precisely because he felt that eventually you had to have an opposition party, an alternative if the party became unpopular, and in the modern world you had to have a safety valve. But having said that, I think he understood this as a matter of principle, but he never gave any actual evidence by his actions of getting ahead with it. Because it was, you know, he would tell the Parliament what he wanted, and it was a rubber stamp Parliament. So while nominally there was the small opposition group that you mentioned, the Front, as a practical matter, it was you know, a facade. He was absolutely hipped on the modernization and education, and particularly industrialization, as I say, with Japan as his model, totally not understanding the difference between the most homogeneous people in the world, the Japanese, who lived in their islands for centuries and developed their own way of doing things, and his country, which had half Persians, and the rest between five great minorities: the Arabs, the Kurds, the Azerbaijani Turks, the Turkomans up in the northeast corner, and the great Baluchis who stretched down the whole business. Half of Iran was divided in minorities, five minorities. Half the population consisted of five minorities, and half of the relatively homogeneous Persian, so-called Persian population.
Do you want to conclude with some general reflections on
I think the Shah was a man who had all the right intentions for his country. I think he had ambitions for his country and not himself. He was not a corrupt man himself. He had no need to be corrupt. He had everything that he needed and wanted. But he did tolerate corruption in his family and his immediate family. And his downfall, as I say, was basically caused by a whole series of things, high of which was his total lack of understanding about a terrible mistake he made, economic mistake, just as responsible for a man who had no formal education and who had educated himself but who knew nothing was his dependence, total dependence on yes men, because he had such a strong authoritarian voice himself. He surrounded himself only with people who said yes to him. There was a bit of an alienation between him and his younger brother, Prince Abdulaziz, whom I admire and respect. He was a distinguished agronomist, set up the first agricultural stations in Iran to develop things. But he and his brother were estranged for a considerable period because he disagreed with his brother about certain things that he knew more from his educational background and the like. So the combination of yes men, no attention to detail, when you don't know when your government doesn't know, and you have no idea, but your government doesn't know whether you've committed to $450 million or $1 billion of arms purchases, you can see how difficult the situation was. But he was a man who wanted the best for his country, who wanted to develop a form of democratic society, who enfranchised women, who secularized school and said everybody must be educated, and started out, who started the trade union movement, who did a great deal to improve the health standards through the health corps and the like. He did a lot. He tried to do a lot for his country, and unfortunately for, I think, everybody, he fell short and went down because of certain shortcomings of his own, some personal and some simply total lack of knowledge and experience and understanding of economic realities.
Thank you very much.